Well, it's a pleasure to welcome along Lucas Santos Evans from Sao Paulo in Brazil. It doesn't get more sort of diverse than that, really. Welsh surname and a Brazilian surname. Lucas, what brings you to Llanelli?
That's a good question. I'll probably say my wife. I'm married to a Pembrokeshire born and raised woman, and I've got two Welsh Brazilian kids. One born in Carmarthen and the other one born in Swansea.
Right.
So we are a Welsh Brazilian family.
And when did you leave Brazil?
So I've been to a few countries, actually. I first left Brazil when I was 16 to go to Uruguay.
Yeah.
And after Uruguay, I actually came to Wales for the first time to study, to learn English.
Yeah.
Although some people would say if you'd like to learn English, you should go elsewhere. But it was a very good experience. After Wales, I then went to do some voluntary work in West Africa. I worked in Niger, Mali, Burkina, Morocco. But 5.5 years ago, my wife and I were living in Brazil. And we felt like it was the right season for us to come back to Wales and start serving the community here.
Yeah.
So 5.5 years ago, we came back, and then we had our two kids here.
And you're with World Horizons?
I actually just finished my work for World Horizons, but I've been with them for 17.5 years.
Just explain a little bit about what they do.
So World Horizons is a Christian charity that operates in many places in the world. It's actually started here in Wales in the 70s, so we can be proud of that. But the charity has expanded its work to the Americas, so there are charities in the US, in Venezuela, Paraguay, Brazil, has expanded its work in Africa, in many countries, and in Asia as well. So we work in the Middle East. And a lot of what we do comes with a heart to serve communities that have not been served. So we're looking at Christian working in the areas of health, education, mentoring. We are working with languages, we're working with sports, we're working with church planting. So we're going into areas that have not been exposed to the gospel yet, but we're coming with a heart to actually serve people and say, how can we help you?
Looking at what's coming up, then we've got the Thursday local elections. Do you vote? Have you voted?
So that's an interesting thing. I for five years I was not eligible, but we're in May now. So 5 months ago, I applied for indefinite leave to remain and I became a resident.
Right.
And with that, I also applied to vote. So I got my polling card last week, and it will be the first time that I vote here in Wales.
Do you think your vote counts? Will it matter? Will it make a difference?
So I come from a country where voting is mandatory. So you've got to vote. And if you don't vote, you pay a fine.
Right.
So it's a really interesting experience to be somewhere where it's not mandatory, where you don't have to. But I always look at it from a responsibility. You know, I can't really complain about politics and what I would like to be done or what's not being done if I'm not playing an active role.
Well, you can do that, but can you also see the point of a lot of young people I've been speaking to who say, look, the politicians just aren't representative. They're not. We only have a choice of red, blue and sort of yellow or green, that it's not enough. We need new parties, we need new politicians, we need people who are far more in touch with the diversity of life, the experience of life within communities, sometimes at the most harsh, and vulnerable sort of spaces in communities.
Yeah, I know very little about Welsh politics and UK politics, and I actually think that that's a good thing from what I'm hearing from a lot of people. So I'm actually starting to understand a bit more now, not just the political system, but the political parties. But having lived in a lot of different places, I wonder if the whole system, the whole political system across the board needs to change.
A bit of refreshing. We're looking at a deficit in democracy, they're calling it, where a large number of councillors are going in unelected. A lot of young people aren't voting. Maybe even a lot of people from diverse backgrounds, BAME communities and so on, aren't engaging, aren't voting because they feel they're not represented. Is this something that, you won't mind me saying you come from a BAME community.
Yeah.
Is this something that you going forward are going to be sort of working with and looking at and trying to engage more with people from these communities?
I think it's interesting the times that we're living in. Without diving too deep into immigration and refugees seeking asylum in the UK, but it's a definitely interesting age that we're living in, where Wales is becoming more diverse. The UK is becoming even more diverse. So when we're talking about democracy and representative democracy, looking at not just looking at the numbers, but looking at communities being represented. And how the world is going with the division, I think it's really difficult to look at things the way they are, which is why, I don't think that just a bit of refreshing in politics needs to happen. I think the whole system needs to change. And, you said young people aren't voting because they're not feeling represented, or our underrepresented communities not voting because they feel like they're not being represented. So my question would be, why is that? And if we don't dive deep into questions, if we're just, over the surface, then we're not really going to change it.
Traditionally, even with the media, it's been a sort of a white middle-class male fraternity, if you like. Are you? I mean, it's. I think it's more difficult for me as a white, reasonably middle class male to cast an eye over this and to cast some form of judgment or opinion over it. I welcome the diversity. I've sort of championed in my life, the equalities and seen it slowly coming forward. Now it seems to be coming much faster, much quicker, far more activism, far more sort of welcome. Far much more of a welcome for that across communities. Do you see it as a positive? Do you see the dam busting in a way, and that, we are going to come to a point whereby everything we see from advertising, from the media, from politics, is going to have that representation? We can see just about everyone, all colours of the world, all creeds, all religions of the world, sort of coming together and, being as one.
I think sometimes we need to be careful when we label things. A lot goes in the media talking about the white man, and the problem isn't being white. The problem is white supremacy. So when we're talking about things, to do with different ethnicities and race, people get very wary of that, and it's very difficult to have conversations about it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to voting, because we're talking about politics, what I personally find it very difficult is because I come from a very different background, and even historically speaking, my country was put together in a very different way to the UK. When you look at voting, I often ask people, why do you vote a certain way? And they will tell me, because this is what I want to happen. These are my preferences. So the idea that I'm giving is that in the UK, we have a very individualistic approach to politics. So you may look at Brexit, you may look at on a number of different matters, from Wales being a devolved nation, and people vote based on their personal preferences. Whereas I come from a more community-based nation. And although I can't speak for everyone, when I look at politics, I'm not necessarily looking at what are my preferences, what I want to happen in my community, but I'm looking what needs to happen in my community so that things get better for everyone. Not just for those that look like me, that speak like me, that talk like me, that think like me, but actually how things can be better for everyone. And in that, I don't think we all need to be the same or think the same things. I think diversity is a gift. So when we're talking about ethnicities and cultures, if we look at our differences as a gift and we learn how to work them through and to understand each other, I think we're going to be a much, much better nation.
Do you think that politics has to go through some form of radical change then? Do you think that the structures, if you said you come from a different country and the structure here is different, the structure here is basically that a particular political party chooses a person to put forward for election. Maybe they've had some form of informal interview, or they're preferred because they look a certain way, or they talk a certain way, or they're gendered a certain way, or there's so many factions that might be involved for choosing that person. Quite complex in many cases, but quite often that person may not have the qualifications or the experience. They might just be a political head nodder, and therefore they're selected. Now that person then goes into the structure of government and sits on some very powerful decision-making processes involving millions of pounds, involving sort of really critical decisions that will impact on the community. Do you think going forward that maybe we should be looking at those candidates being scrutinised really quite comprehensively before they're selected, on qualifications, on experience, on ability to actually fulfil that role? Is that the way politics needs to go?
Well, I don't think I'm in a position to say where politics needs to go. And even when comparing my own upbringing and my culture when it comes to politics, Brazil, in my personal opinion, is no example to be followed by the world. But I do think there are no quick fixes. So when we're talking about politics and the economy, to be honest, there isn't one thing that we need to do or a set of things that we need to do that will solve the problem. So I would say we need to look at the future. As part of my eligibility to vote, I went on Facebook a couple of weeks ago and I asked my friends, where can I find information on people standing up for council? Not just what their names are. So I went on Facebook and I asked my friends, where can I find information on people running for local and county council? Not just what their names are and what political affiliation they may have. What are their proposals? And basically more than just what I could find out there. And I was a bit shocked by the response, which was, you can't. The only information you can get is what comes through your door. Which, to be honest, we need to start asking some questions about how environmentally friendly we are when people are shoving stuff through your door all the time and you have no control over it. But that's a separate issue. But actually having a central place where you can gather information, where you can ask questions. Although I say Brazil is no example when it comes to politics, especially right now, I would say to actually have some forums where everyone that is standing up for council is required to come. And again, not a hostile space. And actually right now that we're doing a lot more online stuff, why not have something on Zoom, have something on Teams where candidates can be asked questions, not what they think about this party or that party or who's not doing this, who's not doing that. But actually, why should community vote?
Well, that's a great point, because I know we spoke to you about what we're doing here, and this is very much what we do. We get the candidates to come along and we ask the public to ask questions, and we ask questions, and the public can be here also asking questions. What do you think of this setup? Do you think this is sort of because it's portable, it's mobile, we can go into these communities, we can do these kind of things. Do you think the media need to take note of more things like this and also go out and facilitate and engage and help out in that way?
Looking at what is happening locally, I think it's one of the key items for change. One could look at a major structure. Let's put this in place, that in place. But if you don't look at the grassroots, the little beginnings and what is happening in individual communities, then we miss the point. But gathering people who are different, who are sometimes hostile to one another, is a very difficult thing to do. So to actually have a neutral space where people know they're not going to be cornered, they're going to be respected, they're going to be heard, and have good people to facilitate it, I think is an excellent idea.
Well, Lucas, many thanks for speaking to us, and good luck. I know you're going into politics. We're not going to talk too much about it, but you're going up there to the Senate, so good luck with your job. And having spoken to you, I'm sure you will reach great heights. Very fascinating conversation that we've had here at World Horizons today. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Johnny Owen, the Labour candidate for Pantyffynon in Ammanford. Johnny, I walked around the town here today. Some people milling around, some shops open, new shops, but a lot of shops closed. Parking, you have to pay a small fortune for if you move from car park to car park. Plaid Cymru have been, campaigning on improving the towns, the 10 Towns campaign, saying that they're spending here, spending there, millions available. Has Ammanford seen the benefits of that as yet, or is it still suffering?
I think it is still suffering, yeah. In earlier on about the Ammanford Town main post office being closed, and it's been closed since last October, November, and it's now May 2022, and we're running a campaign, to try and get it reopened, and it's up for franchise at the moment, so watch this space. We're hoping the main town post office will reopen soon, because there's a lot of elderly people who haven't got transport, and they have the nearest post office since Ammanford is closed is in Pennybank or Llanelli, Llanelli, Crosshands. They have to go a long way. So it's a big main, a town the size of Ammanford needs the main post office being open.
I'm not sure if you're aware of the recent poll that says that Plaid Cymru could lose the Carmarthenshire administration. Do you think there's any truth in that? I mean, are you close, do you think, to getting in?
Yes, I'm quite confident myself, I think we're going to take, maybe 70% of the seats, We've run a good campaign, and, tomorrow's the big day, so we're all excited, and some areas we don't have any seats at all, so we're targeting like 7, 8 to 10 seats in 16 areas that we haven't got a seat at all. So we're very confident, and, you've got to have an opposition, and Labour should be represented in these areas, yeah.
A lot of councillors have either stood down through age, retirement, or they've switched over to the independent. A lot of them are in their 70s and 80s, and a lot of young people are saying, look, that's not representative of us. You don't speak the same language. You don't walk the same walk. You're, if you don't mind me saying, over 70.
Yes, I'll be 74 in June, yeah.
And you're looking like Barry Gibb there with your long hair and your tan. But tell me, is this an ageist thing? Is this an ageist criticism? Do you think there's room for both, or do you think that it is only the sort of preserve of elderly gentlemen, white to middle class, and the occasional lady in Carmarthenshire thrown in as well?
No, I mean, you mention age, and as far as I know now, young people are allowed to vote at the age of 16, and when I was younger, I had to wait till I was 21 to vote. So the fact that people can vote now at 16, there are a lot of young people around, especially where I live in my area, and they do talk to me about their concerns, so I don't think it's just an elder. Politics is not just an elderly people's thing, really, It might have been 50 years ago, but now, in this day and age, I mean, young people are concerned about all sorts of things, yeah.
Are you somebody that listens and makes promises and then sort of goes down the pub or finds a cafe somewhere and reads the paper and says, there we are, to hell with that. I've got my wage now, I don't need this.
No, not at all. You made me laugh there.
Do you know anyone like that?
Yes, I do. I do know people like that, yes. Yeah. But no, I'm not in that category personally, no. So, right. No, I wouldn't say that, no.
And do you believe that you have the ability and the power in a way to effect change within your own community? We hear that the council is an officer-led council and the councillors don't have very much power and decision-making. Would you say that's fair? Do you think things need to change? The structure of the council needs to change in any way?
Possibly could do with a bit of tweaking, on certain levels, But, I've also worked in housing, I work for Family Housing Association and Caredig and different organisations, Ammanford Valley Enterprise, Communities First, and all these organisations are very much people-focused and people-led, and then people who come to my door in the Pantyfanning community, they want to know about the vandalism in the park, they want to know about the rubbish on the streets. So many concerns they have, as well as big Labour things like about scrapping the television licence and that sort of thing. We're hoping that'll be a vote winner. So, we do take, I'm always writing down people's concerns and what they're, approaching me about,
There is a concern that there's a democratic deficit in that there's so many councillors have gone in unelected. Do you think things like this that we're doing here aids that democratic sort of process, that we're giving people a platform that people can come here and as with you, express their views, express their concerns, and then we can pass them on to you, we can broadcast that to a wider audience? Do you think this is a good thing, what we're doing?
Yes, I do. I mean, I didn't know about it. I just happened to be in the Labour office this morning having a cup of coffee, and then one of your people came in and told me about it. Now here I am in front of the microphone. So I didn't actually know it was happening, and I didn't see it advertised anywhere. So I just took the opportunity to come and speak and express my point of view. Yeah, and thank you for inviting me.
There we are, named after a very famous boxer as well, Johnny Owen. Many thanks for
Johnny
coming.
Johnny from Merthyr, yes. I'm not as famous as Johnny from Merthyr.
You may be now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Here at World Horizons in Llanelli down the North Dock. Not many people around, a lot of walkers with their dogs and so on. 1 day left for the local elections here, well, across Wales, but in Cymru. Particularly for us, we have Gwynoro Jones, who's been casting an eye over some of the main stories in the news regarding local elections. I'm going to start with one of those, Gwynoro, and this is the RNIB saying that over 111,000 people in Wales are blind and partially sighted and are struggling with independence to go out and vote. We talk about equality, we talk about diversity, and yet here we are having quite a large number of people who are, as I said, blind or partially sighted, unable to independently go out. There is the postal vote, but this is a real issue to the RNIB. It's a real issue to those blind and partially sighted people, isn't it?
Oh, yes, certainly. But you have mentioned postal votes, mind. The postal vote system was designed for people who can't leave home, who are unexpectedly ill, long-term ill, or whatever. But I get the point. I get your point that, there should be greater availability and equality for these people. It's a very difficult issue, isn't it? Because at the other end of the scale, being blind or partially sighted or whatever, there's the issue of the voting sheet itself. It would have to be in Braille, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But these things should have been sorted out by now.
Well, the law is very clear. They have to be compliant for blind people. We have to be compliant as journalists and news. Our websites carry disability access on there. Blind and partially sighted people
yes.
can access those sites. I was speaking to somebody yesterday on the radio, and they were saying, we've had to redo all our processes because of the new regulations or to be compliant for blind and partially sighted people. So this is really a big issue, and you have to feel for people that. Imagine yourself as a 16-year-old, first time voting, you're blind or partially sighted. It's quite an exciting thing, and you want to get out there. You want to speak to people. You want to be part of that. It's not good enough just to be sat in the house and say, okay, here's a piece of braille paper, whatever it is, you can send your vote in that. They have a right to participate and a right.
I agree 100% with that. And as I said, answering your first point, it should have happened by now. It should have been sorted out by now.
Who needs to sort it out? Is it the Welsh Government? Or the Electoral Commission? Who is it?
Oh, you're asking me a question I can't answer, but I would have thought the Welsh Government has a responsibility, but so has local authorities. I suspect it's local authorities on where and how people vote within their area. On the overall principle, I suspect it's the Welsh Government as well. It's so difficult, isn't it? Well, the one I've noticed over the years is the availability for physically handicapped people. Very difficult to get inside some polling stations. In fact, if you are disabled, handicapped, or whatever, getting to some polling booths is nigh on impossible. So you have the blind people, you have the physically disabled people. It's an issue, there's no doubt about that, and they should address it. And now that it's been raised by the Royal National Institute for the Blind, I think they should start paying attention to it in future elections, and the next general election, for instance.
Let's look at another issue. I was speaking to some university students over the weekend, a large gathering of students actually, and I was just asking them about the local elections. Do they take an interest in politics? Will they be going to vote? And almost every single one said, no, we will not be voting because we do not want to vote Labour, we do not want to vote Conservative, Lib Dems or anything else. There is no party that actually speaks our language and represents us and does what we want them to do. That's quite concerning, isn't it?
Well, first of all, voting at local elections has been a problem for decades. What is it? Something like 30%, 40% if you're lucky, turn out and vote. The reality is, and this is what has disturbed me most about politics throughout my life, people are not as interested in politics day to day as you and I are. Now, why is that? Must be a range of issues, must be a range of concerns. One of them, which we might address later, is the voting system itself. It doesn't encourage change. The system is rather old-fashioned and clapped out, to be honest. The first past the post. Now, come to young people. I don't know what political parties can do more than that they're doing now. You go on social media, and I'm amazed by the amount of stuff that the political parties and individual candidates throw out there on social media. And social media is supposed to be for the young people. Wherever I turned, is all sorts of people, members of parliament, local candidates, other people. They do their best in getting their story out. It's a question of interest, isn't it? From my point of view. And when you say they don't find any political party suiting their needs, well, what is their demand? That's the first thing. What do they want? What do the young people of today want?
I think a lot of young people from, gathering from what I've spoken to them really about is that it's not a conspiracy theory, but there is a serious lack of trust. They feel almost sort of marginalised, left out. They see decisions being made, planning applications, developers, big business. You know what it's like. It says lobbying, people getting contracts, people getting work, people's businesses succeeding, and them, having gone through university, got their, worked hard, got their degrees, got their masters, got their PhDs or whatever. Wales, in general, isn't a very welcoming place for them. They want to leave. They want to go.
Yes, fair enough. But you've just described something that is common to all of us. We all are left out of the system. We all are left behind. The opportunities to state your view, to state your case, to make influence is very limited. It's limited to seeing your local councillor, to seeing your member of parliament, writing letters to government ministers, making your comments as we are now. But in the round of things, our ability to influence is very, very minimal. And that is the problem. You know what I mean? The lack of trust in politics and in politicians has been there for decades. You know, opinion polls after opinion polls show that the two most untrustworthy people is a politician and an estate agent, and one or two others, lawyers in fact as well. You know, but there we go. That has always been the case. People are now, to be political for once, Boris Johnson has made the situation 10 times worse. Everybody knows that he misleads. Parliament cannot bring him to account. They cannot call a spade with what he is doing. There's the right-wing media, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express in particular. It's a problem we have. It's not just a young people's problem. I understand their frustration. People of my age, pensioners, we've got used to it and we've accepted it. The younger generation want to change things.
We have seen what's happening across Wales. So there are, these huge numbers of councillors going in unelected, and there are. What's happening in Llanelli is that Labour, for instance, took the stance and said, look, we want to get a far more diverse range of people here. We want to get far more qualified and experienced people, and we want to get younger people. When Labour did that, the hard and fast members of the Labour Party, former Labour councillors, did a runner. They formed the Independents. Now, one has to question that and ask, the questions need to be asked. Were these councillors in it purely for the cash, the wage, the perks, or were they in it for the Labour Party? And if they were in it for the Labour Party, why object so strongly and leave and go to the Independents?
There are all sorts of reasons why people go into politics full time. So I cannot judge what the average one in Llanelli do or anywhere else. People go in because they're interested. People go in because they want to advance themselves. People go in because they want to help the community. People go in because of status. People go in because of image. All sorts of situations. And when you think of it, you see, you go back 20, 30 years, there was that big push to get more women into politics. Now, when that started in the Labour Party, there was an almighty hue and cry against it. But look, by today, look what's happened. Look how many members of the Senedd are women. Look how many are in Parliament. It's not 50-50, but gradually it is going that way. Same with young people. The struggle will be, of course, these people who've been there for years and years, they begin to think it's their right to be there. That's the first thing. I've been here for 20, 30 years. I've done my bit for the community. I am well known. This is my area, blah, blah, blah. All that sort of personal image thing that operates them. And along come young people, and they turn to the officers of the Labour Party and say, why do you want these young people? I've been here all these years. It's an understanding that the world needs to change. How do you change people's behaviour? How do you change people's attitude? I don't know.
We're looking,
but that's what it's all about, is getting them to understand they're only part of the process.
The local elections are there purely for people to go out and vote for the candidates who are going to sit in the council chamber and take some responsibility in the decision-making that happens within the community. We heard from Mike Theodolu last week saying, look, this council is officer-led. You have no power. Councillors really have no say in this. Why should people vote for, essentially, one person within the community to represent them, to go in there, having very little sort of decision-making power at all? What is the point?
Gosh, again, Alan, you are raising some pretty fundamental stuff, which is at the heart of power structures within our country. The very thing you said can apply to a Member of Parliament. A Member of Parliament votes, a member of parliament represent their constituency, unless you're a shadow minister, unless you're a committee chair, unless you're a cabinet minister or another minister, you are only there trying to influence. That is all you can do. Now, our system of government is run by civil servants at local level, by officials. That's how it goes. Can't be any other way.
Shouldn't we localise it a bit more? Go back to the mayoral systems, where we say, look, like London has its mayor. Look in Llanelli here. Let's have Llanelli borough. Let's have a mayor. Let's have a larger group of people drawn from a wider, diverse background and say, okay, hand them the budget. They're qualified. We have an accountant. Yeah. We have decision makers. We have doctors. We have nurses. We have all those people on there, and they are the people. We seem to have too few people representing far too many, in my view anyway.
Well, it's a question of balance, isn't it? You know what I mean? When you think of it, there are 8,000 town and community councillors in Wales alone. 8,000. I think it's one councillor for every 300 voters. Now that is absurd, okay? That is ridiculous. Then at county council level, you have about 1,300 councillors. Average about 2,500 each. Far too many in Wales are like that. I'm a believer in that, in the mayoral system. I'm a believer in that. A strong mayor, fewer authorities. There are 22 in Wales. Actually, I think we could do with a dozen, 15 at most. 22? Now, what does that mean? When I was working for local government, there were 8 directors of education. What do we have now? 22 directors of education. It's gone haywire. To be fair, successive ministers have tried to change it. Leighton Andrews notably tried to change it. Because he tried to change it, he lost his seat. He lost his seat in the Rhondda because he wanted to try and do something about the reorganisation of local government. Yes, there are too many councillors, far too many. Get the situation streamlined. Fewer authorities with greater powers. Not less powers, greater powers, but fewer of them.
Okay.
And yes, let's have the mayoral system. Cardiff should have a mayor, Swansea should have a mayor, Newport should have a mayor. Of course. The counties is a bit different. I don't know how that can work. It's not that it cannot work. Should Carmarthenshire have a mayor? Possibly. Who knows? But the big cities, Wrexham, Newport, Cardiff, Swansea, and several others, should have a mayoral system where you pinpoint the mayor as the person that carries the responsibility.
I'm with Callum Higgins, the candidate for Ammanford, Labour. Callum, you've got an office in the town here. Obviously, I'm assuming you're close to the coalface in a way that you know what makes Ammanford tick, you know what it needs. I imagine you're getting messages on the doorstep as well. Latest poll suggests that Carmarthenshire could fall to Labour, but that's a poll where there's not a lot of local knowledge behind that. We know that you've lost a lot of people to the independents as well, and that they possibly won't want to come into a pact with Labour. They'll want to go in with Plaid Cymru. So where does it lie at the moment? Well, what's your feeling on Ammanford? What's your feeling on Carmarthenshire? Could Labour take it back?
So Carmarthenshire is a really varied county. It's 3 or 4 different big communities all in one county. So Ammanford is very much a microcosm on its own. So looking at the local issues here, people in Ammanford and the Amman Valley feel ignored by County Hall. There's been investment in Carmarthen, investment in Llanelli, very little to be seen of equivalent in Ammanford. So the town centre is a big issue, being left really to decline. And the parks in the town here, the town council have, again, let it decline, not invested. So most of the play equipment's been shut off over the summer. And those are big issues locally. So that locally probably means we're in a good position to capitalise. I hope people recognise the issues and vote on those local issues here and vote Labour, because it has been a plied area for the last decade or so. But Carmarthenshire, as you said, there's a whole array of different politics. The independents and Plaid Cymru be fighting it out in the north. Llanelli, it's Labour against independents, but a new type of independent who might not see eye to eye with the current independents.
Yeah.
So there's a it'll all come down to Friday and discussions between parties about who can form a coalition, I think.
We hear the same sort of accusations laid at the feet of Plaid Cymru. Ammanford is suffering here, Llanelli is suffering here. But when you look at the track record and when you look at what's been publicised from the press department and the marketing department, we hear a different story. We hear a lot of investment, a lot of buildings being transformed. It's one of these things. Gwenori reminded me that was asked at a time when he was in politics, have Plaid done anything good at all?
I try to stay away from the negative stuff. I think there's a lot in common between Plaid Cymru and Labour, particularly, there's a national pact in place, at Welsh government level. But there's certainly a feeling locally that the rhetoric hasn't matched the delivery. So, as I said, Debenhams was bought in Carmarthen for 18 million. 200,000 is what's allocated for Ammanford. It's flower pots and a lick of paint, and radical investments needed to the level of Carmarthen's seen. That's what people are talking about around here.
You'll be aware, having been at County Council, that it's very much an officer-led establishment. We've been talking to a lot of people, a lot of candidates who are saying, look, things need to change. The structure, the constitution, more localised decision-making, maybe a local mayoral system, something that gives the power back to more people on a local level than we have, at the moment. It's a few people have that decision-making power. The elected officers, the chief executive has delegated powers for just about everything. You know that legally. The Constitution. You're a solicitor, aren't you?
I trained as a barrister.
Trained as a barrister. So you'll know the legal format there. How can that change, Callum? Because unless you turn that on its head and give that power back to committees and mayors and local decision makers, I know we've got rural councils and town councils, but the money, the big decisions are made at county level.
Yes, certainly. I think Carmarthenshire has changed slightly since Mark James left.
Right.
I think there's a different atmosphere in County Hall. Officers are much more willing to talk with members than they were. So I want to just say the positive there, that I think the leadership in the county is better than it was.
Right.
And there's certainly good people in place who are willing to serve the county and serve whoever the political masters are who are elected.
Yeah.
The key thing, I think, is having a strong manifesto and saying these are the priorities we've been elected on and this is what we want the county to go direction-wise. And I think, but more than before, I think this is the best Labour manifesto that's been put together for Carmarthenshire. Looking through it, there was very little I could pick out that anybody could disagree with. And I think actually looking across at the other parties, there's a lot of agreement across the manifesto. So whoever's in coalition should be able to agree a strong agenda. And then it comes down to that leadership, as you say, about the councillors saying, actually, we've been elected to set the direction. Obviously, operationally, the officers then put it into practice. So the one thing I'd say that has been disappointing over the last few years, I remember when Plaid Cymru were in opposition to Labour, and they talked a good game. Once they got into power, it just evaporated. And I think that's disappointed a lot of Plaid voters, and you hear that on the doorstep.
Is that generally, if you speak to young people, that seems to be the sort of generic opinion? Look, politicians will promise everything, they'll say this, and they'll come election time we see them, and that's the end of it. We don't see them again. They sit in the theatre there in County Hall and vote and read a couple of reports, and that's about it, and they get paid very well for doing it. That's the general perception of politics has lost a lot of faith, a lot of trust, a lot of interest, really. It seems to be Gwenora and I are the only people in Carmarthenshire that are out and about talking about it.
One of the things I've noticed is MPs have had it tough for the last 20 odd years, since the expenses scandal kicked off. It's been quite negative towards them. It was probably negative before then, but it really got a lot worse. It's trickling down to councillor level now that you get. It used to be, I don't like politicians, but my councillor's all right. It's starting to trickle down. You've got to justify being there. You have to deliver. Good councillors who deliver are getting a good response on the doorstep. Those that haven't delivered are getting negative responses, and I've heard that more than before. So, you have to deliver if you're going to promise, and otherwise it gives all councillors a bad name, unfortunately.
Do you think then we're seeing the fruits of that, the results of that, because the democratic deficit now in so many councillors going in unelected that we have a lot of apathy. We have a lot of people who are just saying, look, it's not going to make a difference, really, is it?
Yeah, the unopposed councillors is a worry generally. That's on the increase across Wales. We made sure we put candidates sometimes in seats where we thought we might not win, but we wanted to trigger an election. We did that. We did put paper. We have put paper candidates up in some places. It's important because we want people to have a voice. That person should be, whoever's elected will then get a mandate to deliver for their locality. But yeah, there's increasingly an apathy. We're hearing that, and everybody gets the backlash of poor performances of a local councillor. I think they don't necessarily switch their vote. They just tell you they don't think anything will change, and that's a real challenge on the doors.
We saw the surge of support for Labour on the back of Mark Drakeford's handling of the pandemic and the success in the Senedd elections. Do you think that will have an impact and replicate slightly on the local elections?
Mark Drakeford's definitely a positive, and there are people that bring him up negatively, but I think they're probably never going to vote for us anyway. When you're looking back at our historic data, they were probably Conservative voters quite through and through. So there's a big shift from Plaid Cymru to Labour because of Mark Drakeford's performance and standing up for Wales. He's seen as a strong leader for Wales. Welsh Labour's branded itself distinctly from English Labour, if you want to call it that, and I think that's a good thing. That's again attracting particularly Plaid Cymru voters, and yeah, I think there's definitely a shift there to recognise that Mark Drakeford's been a good leader during the pandemic, but increasingly, and it's a good thing, I think. I've heard more local issues discussed on the door in this campaign than ever before. The message, I think that some people tried to push that send Boris a message. I don't think that's really relevant in this campaign. I've talked more about bins and parks and pavements than I ever have before. Whereas in the past, it might have been, send the Tories a message. I don't think that's really been the issue in this campaign. I think it's Welsh Labour's performance is being seen positively, and what can you do locally?
And so if people are thinking about, who to vote for now, as you say, the manifesto you've got is quite comprehensive. It's quite localised. It seems to make sense. It ticks the boxes. But are you going to deliver that, or are you going to be, as we've seen historically, a lot of the times Labour will just get in and say, well, the officers, have the power. The officers will do this. And out the window goes the manifesto, and we're just hanging on for crumbs of whatever the CEO and the officers say we can have.
And that's always the challenge, because once you get in, you have an ambitious agenda, and you're immediately trying to talk you down from it because the cost generally, the Section 151 officer, again, a very, very capable person, their duty is to make sure the budget is balanced at the end of the day. So they're always trying to tell you, where's your money coming from. We've discussed beforehand our manifesto with the officers, so we think it's realistic. Again, a lot of it would be what bits do we do first, which bits do we leave till later in the term, try and prioritise. Hopefully the economy's in a position where we've got that money coming in to do what we want. We do have a big investment plan. I think we'll need to look at ways of income generation. We don't really want to put it on the council taxpayer because hard times. But yeah, it is going to be a challenge, you're right. And I think that's always the internal politics of Carmarthenshire and local government. You come in with big ideas, and you have to keep thinking and pushing as a group, before otherwise, routine sets back in and you end up not delivering what you promised.
And for any independents listening in who are sort of warming their hands over the electric fire on one bar now, thinking ahead, Labour could get this according to the polls, and maybe they'll offer us this chance to come in for coalition. You've got a lot of people who've turned their backs on Labour within the independents. Is that something that's going to be a problem? Are you going to have to deal with these people and offer them that chance if you're going to get into the administration? So
there are two types of independents in my book. There's the independent, long-term independent members, particularly in the north of the county. They're a mixed group of people. They've got mixed political views. Some of them vote Labour, in general elections. I know that. I've talked to them. There are then a new group of independents who are challenging their ex-Labour members, and they, as you said, they probably won't work with us. My own prediction is that not many of them will get back in. I think the Labour Party in Llanelli is very strong. We've got a very good set of candidates to replace those who left. And we're working for every vote. We're not taking it for granted there. I think, the team that Llanelli has in Labour Party will come through in the end. And we just hope that, all the Labour voters turn out and back back that group of Labour candidates. Then we'll look to see what the independent group looks like. As I said, I'm willing to work with the majority, if not all of them. I think there's some very good people there. We've worked with them in the past. And there are a lot of personal connections. I'm friendly with a lot of them as an ex-councillor. And so are many of the other councillors have personal connections with that group. And I think what you may not be hearing is that I think they feel a bit disrespected of late in the current coalition with Plaid Cymru. Plaid Cymru pushing for a majority. They're standing against them in the north of the county. Those independent councillors, I think, see Plaid Cymru as a longer-term threat to themselves, and we're willing to treat them with respect, give them a good voice in the cabinet if we go into coalition. There's a deal to be done, I think, if we're in that position.
And Rob James, that seat there in Llanelli is going to be tightly contested. The independents could split the vote. Rob could lose his seat and then you would lose your Carmarthenshire Labour leader. Who's in line then? Who's going to throw the hat in the ring then?
I didn't see this question
to jump into Rob's seat.
No, I'm not going to go down that line. I think Rob is very well known in his patch. He's done, if you look at social media in Llanelli and the work he's done in Park Howard and representing his ward, challenging where the school was going to be placed on a greenfield site, he's got a lot of support in that seat. I know that there are a lot of candidates standing in that seat and splitting the vote, but the core Labour vote will come through, I think, and Rob's done a good job. So if we ever cross that bridge, we'll come to it, but I don't think so.
There we are. Well, Callum Higgins, many thanks for speaking to us. As always, thank you.
Diolch, Alan.
Well, surprise, surprise, we have another Labour candidate at the van in Ammanford, Kevin Madge, a familiar face to most people in the town. He walks around here, he's like the Queen or the King, everyone's waving to him. Kevin, you've got a good reputation in Ammanford. You've been a stalwart of the county council for many years. You call yourself, I think, the grandfather of the council.
Well, I am now, and when I go back now, if I get elected tomorrow, I'll be the longest serving member. I'm the last of the 81 intake in 95,
Are we going to see big changes? Are the people in Ammanford placing that vote in the Labour vote box, are they going to get something back from this now? Is Ammanford going to have investment? Are things going to improve for people, or are we just hearing empty promises?
Well, there's not going to be a magic wand at any time, but you only need to walk around Ammanford and see the state of the place. You go see the old Lloyd's Bank, that the scaffolding has been up there for 4 years, and the state of that building. Now that should have been that's only one thing. You've got to deal with the bread and butter things on a daily basis, and you've got so many things there that could be done. Maintenance issues. All the railings are rusting away. You've got things that seats. Now that's on a small scale, but we need to tackle that first, and I think that's important. And then we need to look at what funding we can bring into Ammanford, because a lot of money's gone elsewhere. Levelling up money, I'm so angry with that. And you can, Jonathan Edwards and Plaid Cymru, they bought Debenhams, but all this money they bought, they got the cycleway from levelling up money. Why didn't that money come to the Amman Valley? 36 million. You think what we could have done with that money here? And there's no more levelling up money for this part of the world. And that breaks my heart, because 36 million could have made a huge difference to the people that I represent. So all I can do, if we go in tomorrow and we take control, we'll look at the books, we'll work hard, and we'll try our best to deliver what we promised in our manifesto over the next 5 years.
And as far as that goes then, I imagine, would Rob still maintain, would he be the leader of the administration then if he's successful and gets voted in?
Yes. Rob is an excellent leader. He's led the Labour group to where we are today. He's worked hard. As the former leader, I look at Rob and I've given him advice. I think he really has inspired us all. He's really got our machine, our political machine working hard. He's found really excellent candidates for us. And I'm going to give him 100% support. I've always supported 100% the leaders that I've served with. And I will do so for Rob, and I will give him over the next couple of years, and I hope that Rob will I think he's going to make a huge difference.
Labour have gone through big changes on a national level, looking at the diversity, the equality, the representation, and it looks like Rob is trying to do the same thing in Carmarthenshire. As you say, he's attracted candidates from a very different background, very diverse background, hasn't he?
Of course he has, and he's he's opened the doors and said, "Come, we are here to listen," and it's incredible that people have come forward. I couldn't believe how many candidates have come forward for this election. Even in my own area, we've got 15 Labour town councillors. We've taken 11 already, and hopefully we'll take all of them tomorrow. So we are fighting all the marginal seats in the Ammanford Valley. We've got excellent candidates. Our office, if you go over to the Labour office there, all the photos of the candidates are there. We've got brand new candidates have never stood before, so I'm really excited tomorrow. And all I would say to the public, give us a chance, give these people a chance. The new candidates, some of them never stood before, and we can see what we can do for this area.
And with a Labour administration, I mean, the polls are saying that Labour have a fair chance of taking back Carmarthenshire, but we spoke to Callum and we spoke to Rob about it. The independents are a real thorn in your side, because ultimately you and Plaid will have to make some form of pact, a coalition with some of those, if not all of the independents, in order to take the administration. That's the reality, isn't it?
Well, I did a coalition with the independents, which are the independents for 11 years, and I worked well with them. So if that's the case, we will always speak to the independents. I know there's new independents, but as far as I'm concerned, I've said they can't be new independents, and they want me in their old Labour. So I couldn't work with those people. But we will see now what the numbers are tomorrow. I hope they'll be looking good for us, and we will do our best to form administration if the people give us that chance.
Where do you see as the definites, and where do you see as the biggest challenges in Carmarthenshire?
Well, the biggest challenge is for me, I've had tears in my eyes since I'm going around my ward, and I've seen it in other areas where families now cannot put heating on anymore. They are desperately worried about next winter. How are they going to heat their properties for their children? We're going back to the Victorian age where families never were able to do this. So, this is not 2022. We might as well be 1822 the way we're going. So that's going to be a challenge for us as a council, working with Welsh Government to make sure that we do our best with the cost of living crisis, which is huge in this area. And I promise that a Labour administration, led administration by Rob, will do our best to deal with it, and working with government.
How big a difference do you think the Drakeford factor will play in this local election? Will it be as much of an impact as it was with the Senate elections?
Well, I've got a lot of time for Mark. He's been an excellent leader. I worked with Roderick Morgan and Carwyn Jones, but Mark, through the epidemic, has shown the leadership that Wales needed. Last year's election showed that, and I think that he comes over very well on the door, and people respect him. And I think we've got an excellent leader in Mark Drakeford.
There we are. Well, Kevin Madge, many thanks for speaking to us, and good luck for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Diolch.